Good morning, or rather good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a hot minute since the last time we played anything, and I'm not really streaming this just to play a game or anything like that. I just wanted to talk a little bit and express a few of the thoughts I've been having before we get into Assassin's Creed Mirage later tonight. Just as I felt it's a game that warrants some discussion, especially for those who might not have played Assassin's Creed before, or maybe have but don't really know where the series has gotten to, maybe played some of the older games and then just kind of left the series, which is understandable to some degree as well. But really just wanted to kind of talk and discuss about the series as a whole before we get into what Mirage is and a little bit about why I'm excited for the game and what I kind of expect out of the game, really, too. The very first thing, I mean, you can see right now we're playing a little bit of Assassin's Creed Rogue. I picked this first. I want to kind of go through Rogue and a little bit of Unity and maybe some Origins later on. But I picked this game first because it's one of those games that really had like this old style of Assassin's Creed. Not quite the old Ezio trilogy or Altair or anything like that, but still old enough to be considered OG Assassin's Creed before Assassin's Creed 1.5 and then Assassin's Creed 2.0, which is what I would call the RPG games that have come out the last couple of years. But just as we walk around here, this is the whole point of what the old games were, is they were bringing this sense of a historical place into the modern age, giving people a reason to like want to jump into history. And I was always a history buff in school, and history was probably my favorite class in high school and in junior high and everything and all that. But part of what drove my love for different time periods was the Assassin's Creed games. Like, I absolutely loved learning about Renaissance history and Roman history due to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, probably my favorite OG Assassin's Creed game, and it's many people's favorite just because of the story and how well the game was made, especially for the time that it was and everything. It was really incredible. I never had one of the Xboxes or the 360 or the PS3 or PS2, whatever it was, I think it was 3 when the first games came out. And so I lived vicariously through some friends that had the games. I loved playing Assassin's Creed 1, the 20 minutes I had with it on a friend's Xbox, and then playing a little bit of 2 on a friend's save file when they completely finished the game, and all I wanted as a kid was to watch videos of people just exploring and experiencing the world. And it's because those worlds were so vibrant and lively, but also the movement, the parkour. I mean, that got me into actually training parkour in real life. And these games mean a lot to me. They've always been one of my more favored series, probably among my favorite series, up there with Zelda. Granted, Zelda's latest entries have been far beyond whatever Ubisoft has come up with the Assassin's Creed series, but that aside, this series of games has always been such an influential bit of my own history, a bit of my own life, you know? So, as we come towards Mirage, 15 years since the first game, almost 16 actually, but the series has gone through a lot of changes. This, again, I picked to start with this game because it is reminiscent of the old series. The same counter combat still existed, the old style of parkour still existed to a greater degree. Again, not quite the Ezio series and how it played, but some of these things were really incredible, especially for their time. We can find a spot here. Some of these parkour starters, like things that just aren't possible in the new games, like these ejects and climbs like that allow you to speed up the process of doing parkour that you're only capable of doing if you know how the game works and you experiment with the systems. People aren't able to master these games without practice, without effort. And not saying by any means that I'm a master of these games. I never really learned to do the crazy parkour or the more interesting stuff with parkour that you can do manually. A lot of it was just hold the right trigger and hold A to climb and sprint, and that was the extent of parkour, and that's eventually what it gets them down to. And I think it's because the majority of people never really learn to utilize these systems, whether or not it's because the game never incentivized it, or if people just never understood the extent of what they could do. I really don't know, but it's something that a lot of us who've played the older games really lament, this way of exploration that just doesn't exist anymore. Let me see if I can do one of these ejects. Shoot. Come on. And eject up and eject back. There we go. Like that. Like you could... Let's see if we can make that smoother. Climb up here. And then eject back. And there you go. There's a way up that you can forcibly do that doesn't exist if you don't understand what systems are in place. And this game was cool because it introduced a couple of things like that. Different style of zipline, or these set parkour pieces that they've got here, if we can make this work. So if you drop down here and do a quick lift, these tic tacs up the side and everything, there's a lot of excitement that could be made based on how good you were with the game and what you understood the game to be capable of doing, and whether or not you tried to push the game to its limits, which is something that's very much absent in the newer games. These things like these ejects or these manual jumps and stuff like that, they don't exist in the new versions of these games, but the new games have their own charm in their own way, and they were definitely needed. The games had gotten stale by the point of Rogue and Unity was such a disappointment that it didn't end up being what could have been the future of the series. And so here we are at this point in time, right back in 2014, where Rogue came out as a last hurrah for the old style of games, and there was a lot to love still about the old style of games. I feel like they never hit their stride with what they could do, and part of it was it innovated a lot initially. It was very much ahead of its time for the very first couple of games, in my opinion, and then after that point they just rode that high, and a lot of people got tired of it kind of feeling samey, and some of it was characters and some of it was gameplay or story elements and things like that, and it comes with the territory of any long-standing series. Some parts of the series or some games will be better than others. Regardless, despite its long history, I feel like all the games have been fun in their own right. Maybe some of the gameplay is not super innovative or different one from the other, but it doesn't always have to be. And these games, for what they were, introduced some cool story elements. Rogue especially here, one of the most underrated games in the series, a game that a lot of people didn't play because they were so invested in trying to get into Unity, and Unity being the failure that it was on launch, just put the series in a really bad position. I miss these games. These games had a emphasis on freedom of movement and freedom of approach towards different situations that was very much based on what you as the individual player wanted to do. It definitely was a little bit more cutter in animations, cookie cutter in animations, and I suppose at some points it really did get stale. Like, after playing the same game roughly for so many years, it's pretty easy to understand why people were so tired of the same formula. That said, when we jump into Unity here in a second, the evolution from this to Unity felt like natural progression. Unity cut out a bunch of stuff that the old games had, the freedom of movement, and even 3 through Rogue had a lot of differences that were taken out from the original games. A lot of freedom of movement that kept people a little bit safer, but there were a lot of complaints from critics at the time regarding clunkiness in movement and the controls being difficult and complex. But it's really one of those things, like most other complex games, where the more you give to something, the more you could do with it. But I think by this point, a lot of people didn't want to give their time and energy to it because they felt that they've been playing it for so long. But really, I have never had an Assassin's Creed game that I've actively disliked until Valhalla. Each one, and even Valhalla to some degree, still has some light to it, and I'm sure you could say that about a lot of games. Even Cyberpunk on release had things that you could learn to love within the game. Granted, it was underneath a bunch of problems and jank and legitimate bugs that were breaking things, but after playing through a bit of Rogue and hoping that you guys kind of see, despite the lackluster gameplay currently, as I'm more focused on talking than I am really playing the game. Good grief, come on. There's enough here to be interesting and entertaining for all types of players, if they're willing to put a little bit of time investment in the game to learn how the mechanics work, how the game works. If you're there's plenty of videos out there from people who want to talk about, you know, movement, that love the movement of the AC games. The parkour within it is something that no other game has really been able to match and build upon. These types of systems and this freedom of movement to climb and to do things in a way that's it's not like the newer games, right? Or what Breath of the Wild ended up building into of this idea of climbing almost anything. There was a set of rules of what you could and couldn't climb and how it worked, and by playing within those rules you could really create something that was unique to you in a lot of ways. And it's not something that is as present in other games. And so now that we've run around in Rogue, let's switch over to Unity. We'll quit out of this. Quit to main menu, and then we'll just close out the game. Give me a second here as I boot it up. But as we get into this stage 1.5 of Assassin's Creed, right? Unity had a lot to love as well. But its release was so abysmal, and it was released so much earlier than it should have been, and had too many bugs to the point where the reception was terrible, and then Syndicate basically flopped because of Unity. This system that was introduced, like, Unity is a very fun game right now, and I've been playing it on lead up to Mirage out of anticipation, and just because it's one of those games that I never actually finished on my own before maybe 6 months ago is when I finally played it to completion. And Unity allows for some of the best stealth in the series. Arguably, probably the best stealth. A lot of people argue that its parkour system was the best in the series. And while I agree that certainly it's the most visually entertaining, I don't know that besides parkour down, or free run down, I think the movement of the first few games were better. The like way that the world was designed in this more boxy manner that was, I guess, easier to maneuver in. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about here as we try and maneuver up along these rooftops. But like, come on, work for me here, thank you. There's a little bit of jank still, and part of that is whether or not I can actively control the character in the way that I want to, but there we go. Unity had a ton to love. It was, I mean, it still is one of the most fun Assassin's Creed games to play, and one of the most replayable, simply because of the co-op missions that you can still do, and there's still plenty of people who are running those. And I mean, if you had better co-op teammates, it'd be probably a lot more fun. But like, even as is, it's I mean, I've never liked the design of Paris in comparison to the older games. I feel like it's just so high, but it's really cool. Like what they've been able to do with the game is incredible. And its parkour system is one of the better parkour systems that the series has seen. Like it's I wouldn't say that I was trying to say that it was bad by any means. I just think I prefer the old system a little bit more than I do Unity. Part of that could be just how difficult to control it can be. Even when you are good at it, it can still jank up a little. Let's see if I drop down here. But Unity's reliance on tools was probably what set it apart more so than any other. It really was a huge step in terms of stealth gameplay, which the first games did have, but like, stealth was hard. No crouch and smoke bombs that you couldn't actively throw or anything like that. I mean, you could actively throw them, but you couldn't throw them at a group like I just did here in Unity. You'd have to throw it at your feet, and then the guards would be alerted by it. It wasn't as useful as it was in later games. And Unity really took the use of the smoke bomb to another level. And it allowed for gameplay that just didn't exist before. The stealth gameplay in this game is something that's so far beyond any of the other games that had come previous to it, just because of these like new mechanics that didn't exist in previous games. Let's see, make sure we're not gonna get spotted here. Can I kill you? Oh, they saw, or one of them saw. Where my guy? Can don't even need to. Okay. See if I lured him out. See if I can. Oh, wrong button. It's been a minute since I played this. Let's see. Away the sword. There we go. Need to figure out how to actually hide behind the corner, because that should have been that should have gone better. But you had this weird corner system that like worked kind of. It's kind of hard to get sorted. How do I? Yeah, it's just like that. Okay, so you just press the A button and cool. Anywho. So like things like that, you know, throwing a smoke bomb into a group of 4 people and then killing them all, or in this case a group of 2, just to make sure that we don't get attacked by the guards when we drop down on these guys. And then the combat wasn't all that great, but it was serviceable. There were some things that worked and some things that didn't, and but there were different ways of taking out people. You have something like 1-2, or which is what I just did just barely. It takes somebody out with a ranged attack and then assassinate them while the other guy's, you know, trying to study the body. But this game provided a lot of changes that were really great for the series, but never came out to fruition, because then after this game was Syndicate, and at that point the company felt and needed a revival for the series, and that's how we got Origins, which is honestly my favorite Assassin's Creed game, not for its gameplay necessarily, but just for its story. And I like Assassin's Creed, but I love the origin of the Creed that's told there, and the whole idea of the Hidden Ones as an organization. I like the Hidden Ones as an organization more than I like the Assassins organization within the lore, which almost feels like blasphemy to say, but I do. I feel like the Hidden Ones were more of this group, because by Altair's time, the Assassins kind of became this zealotist group that had these traditions and ways of thinking that had kind of corrupted what the Creed had originally been, and like the fact that Bayek's group of Hidden Ones was originally just friends and people who believed in a similar cause. They didn't have this, you know, hierarchy necessarily. You had Bayek as mentor, sure, but this idea that, you know, everybody who was a Hidden One is just a Hidden One. They're all the same, and they're all on the same level. They all serve the same purpose. But to see Bayek's kind of end result of who he became at the end of this grand mentor who was not just an excellent leader, but let's see if we can do this stealthily actually. There we go. That's one. Where's number 2? Yeah, he's dead. We won't be able to save his life. There we go. Who's next? This guy here. And finally, we'll kill these 2 following a smoke bomb. Hopefully that gets one of them. There we go. It's one of the things between the old games too, is the easy change between high profile movement, which is like sprinting and aggressive kills, to these low profile kills that don't you know, have as much of an indicator that you've gone and attacked somebody, so there's less likely that you'll be spotted, and you had to decide between the two, and it's just more of an active role, because it doesn't matter if you're crouching or anything, since sprinting is sprinting no matter what. And so if you're sprinting even in crouch mode, your attacks are going to be high profile, and if you're walking or crouching and moving slowly, then your attacks are going to be low profile, and it's much faster and quicker. But there's a high profile assassination and a low profile assassination, and you choosing whenever you went into it, being able to just decide on the fly of, how do I want to take this guy out? Do I want to do it flashy and loud, or do I want to do it quietly and sneakily, and really getting to decide as an assassin. And this was one of the last games. I mean, Syndicate did really well with increasing stealth as a... I think Syndicate had some of the best stealth missions, period, but it ripped so much out of Unity's guts where movement is concerned, and how everything was done, and everything, that it could have been so much more. And that's the kind of the story behind these two games in particular, is they could have been so much more. I just realized I didn't change the capture, so we'll need to cut that out. That's kind of funny but sad. Hold on, let me throw this up here. Try not to forget when it comes to freaking Origins when we pull it up. Like here, what you haven't seen on screen, but what I've been talking about, has been just Unity's use of tools and abilities and everything. We're just gonna do this real quick, but just depending on how you wanted to do things and the way you wanted to go about it. Like, Unity started something that could have been really influential in the series and could have been amazing, but like, high profile, low profile, all of that stuff that I was just talking about, we'll showcase that here in a second. Like here, in a group of two, I could have done that both in high profile, but if you wanted to do it in low profile with it, and there were 4 people, you could only do low profile in order to get all 4 if you were taking them individually. If you high profile assassinated 2 at a time, then you might be able to get away with it, or different things like that. And that's all player choice, left up to the individual. Unity also had plenty of parkour decisions that were left up to the player on how they wanted to do things. Let's see here, kill the criminals. Something like this, quick 1-2, boom. Just a quick shot with a ranged weapon into a short assassination, and there hasn't really been Unity stealth wise, I feel was just an amazing game. As was Syndicate. Syndicate just didn't have the movement and the intrigue that Unity had, I think. But I also wish that Unity was set somewhere else. Like, some people really liked the French Revolution and the setting and everything. I don't particularly vibe with it. It's just not a time in history that I was particularly interested in. No offense to the French. But like, I mean I like AC3, but that was primarily because that was, you know, American history, and for setting wise anyway, but like we were saying earlier, 3, Rogue, Black Flag all had similar parkour. Black Flag is, I would argue, my second favorite Assassin's Creed game. Just story wise was excellent. That story still sticks with me even to this day. I don't think I've had an Assassin's Creed story resonate quite that way except for Origins. And part of the reason was just both of those stories ended in a way that I wouldn't have liked them to end, but that's kind of how life is, you know. And these stories have so often been told in such a way where you can really see that human aspect of each of these characters, of people that could have really existed even though they didn't, and like people that had motivations and wanted to make these choices, but they could really fight for something. And that's another reason why I've loved these games, is characterization and story and everything has always been great. I loved AC3 when it came out, even though a lot of people hated it, and then now that it's been years later, a lot of people have started to warm up to it, but it was not a well-received game, and neither were Unity and Syndicate. Unity due to bugs and glitches and problems, but Syndicate just because it is Syndicate's towards the bottom of my list. It actually, gameplay-wise, it's still fun. I still enjoy a lot of the stealth gameplay aspects and some of the missions and everything, but it still sits, I mean, under Odyssey for me, and Odyssey is bottom of the barrel for a lot of people. The only one that's worse than Syndicate, in my opinion, is Valhalla, but that's by a large margin. We'll get into why in a little bit here, but let's switch over to Origins. Origins was the savior of the Creed, honestly. It brought the series back from the brink. At a certain point, it just, people were kind of done with Assassin's Creed. Even old fans weren't into the game anymore, just because it was stale by a lot of people's, like, people were getting bored of the Assassin's Creed formula and how the game's played and everything, and I don't think I counted myself ever as one of those among them, but I also wasn't too opposed to a new era of the games. Let's make sure I switch the screen over to that this time. Good grief, don't want another situation where you guys are staring at a blank screen for a good 10 minutes. Let's see here, properties. Right, now that we're pulling this up for Origins. Origins has absolutely been my favorite Assassin's Creed game, not because of its gameplay. If it's gameplay wise, I would take Unity, I would take Black Flag, I would take any of the Ezio games over Origins any day, just because of the parkour. But the stealth gameplay, the exploration, everything about Origins was such a refreshing feel for the game. Maybe not necessarily the stealth, but the exploration in the world and having this like open, vast world, which doesn't really work for Assassin's Creed in my opinion, but it works for this game. I fell in love with Egypt again, ancient Egypt again. I've always been interested in ancient Egypt's history and everything, but like this game really brought that excitement of like 6th grade me. And I remember reading all of these stories about Egyptian gods and their own stories about the decisions and experiences that they had, right, of Set and Osiris, or
must be careful now.
Origins was great gameplay-wise, other than the lack of tools kind of sucked, especially coming off of Unity and Syndicate not having that same smoke bomb toolset or whatever. This one you could only drop smoke bombs at your feet, and that was very contextualized by you having to do a certain action before even being able to drop one of them. The eagle, instead of having eagle vision, was also different. I've never really been a fan of this mechanic in particular, but in this game it was novel enough to be interesting and you know, cool for what it was. Let's see here. But this game had so much going for it. It was such a breath of fresh air for the series that it desperately needed, and it really got people interested in it again. It was a necessary evil, but this is where we got to in the first place, was because of Unity's failure. Really, you could really blame Unity's crappy launch for why we ended up with this game being an RPG and being more of this less an Assassin's Creed. But this one, at least stealth was actually viable in this in Odyssey. Stealth in Valhalla does not exist. I played these games to feel like an assassin, and in Valhalla especially, you couldn't even do that. Like, I see people commenting on Valhalla sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, I love the stealth," or getting to play stealthily, and I think to myself, "What stealth? The freaking AI could see your pinky toe sticking out from behind a freaking wall from 200 feet away, and then the entire camp would know where you are." It made absolutely no sense for how the game actively worked, but bye-bye. Oh. Almost lost my cool there. Nope. Nobody hears anything. Let's see, make sure nobody exists. The only thing that Valhalla brought to this formula that was decent was the fact that they gave you a sprint toggle. Even though the sprint toggle actively sucked in Valhalla because it was bound to the left stick being pressed in over anything else. But they ripped parkour to pieces in Origins. That was the only downside, in my opinion, of Origins. I loved the story, loved the character. Bayek is probably my favorite character in the entire series, and next to that would be Valhalla's Basim, who you didn't even play as, but was the assassin in that game and was such an interesting character. But Bayek was great as a main character. I really resonated with his story and just the way that the game made you feel for him. At least made me feel for him. But then you get, like, there's some cool things you could do with parkour, I guess, but like, it's so contextual and limited because of how the world was built, but it worked for the game. It was as good as it could be under its confines, but we've stuck with it for 3 games now, and that's been over the course of, let's see, this was released in 2018 and it's 2023, so like 5 years. Right? 5 years? Yeah, so like this very limited parkour formula is definitely one of the most stale parts of Assassin's Creed now, due to its limitation on personal player expression. You can only do so much. I can't even. Let's see here if I can. I can kind of dismount and do stuff, but it's definitely hard to do properly in a way that actually feels like you're flowing. I know there's people out there who have been able to make it work and everything, but it doesn't give you the tool set to move with parkour. And for this game, it doesn't really matter because, as you can see, the buildings are mostly so spread apart and separate that it doesn't even matter as much. But once you get into how Mirage is looking, I feel like this is going to be its biggest detriment, is the fact that movement is Origins 2.0 with not a bunch of change on that, and I didn't expect it to be. And this is the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to get to in this whole stream, is I want to kind of set my expectations for Mirage, especially for people who haven't maybe haven't played these games or haven't experienced Assassin's Creed in a long time. Maybe since Origins or maybe since before that, but this is the extent of Origins parkour, right? We've got, let's actually, if I can get this to work, we might be able to do something. So you can kind of eject in that kind of situation where there's not really any handholds or things like that, but I freaking love this game, dude. The environment that you're in, regardless of the parkour, this game is still amazing gameplay wise. Besides that, parkour is sad, but everything else gameplay wise I enjoyed. There's ways of getting around in stealth, there's ways of doing things. I feel like stealth was encouraged once you leveled up your hidden blade to the point where you could one-shot assassinate most things. It sucked that you couldn't do that right from the beginning, but with how the games used to be and come into this, it was kind of refreshing and at the time. But definitely became annoying later on. And I'm still kind of glad that you can't one-shot assassinate, even by the end of the game, one-shot assassinate like super commanders. But every other character, I feel like you should have been able to. And it probably should have been something that you could have done from the get-go, and I'm glad they're remedying that. But we get through this, and we get to Odyssey. And a lot of people dislike Odyssey, me included, for the fact that Odyssey just leaned heavily into the whole first civilization, mystical aspect of everything. But it still had good gameplay overall, in my opinion. Odyssey did. It had tools, those special abilities that you could use for stealth specifically. You could spec into just being an assassin if you wanted, and that worked out really well. Like, there's few, if any, characters at this point where I've sank a ton of time into that game, probably over 100 hours, 120 hours my first playthrough. But there was definitely enough in that game to make it to where if you wanted to be an assassin, you could be an assassin. It wasn't the main point of the game. You were a Mystios, a Greek mercenary. But for what it was, I still enjoyed the game far more than I did Valhalla. And Valhalla I still sank 130 hours into or something to play the main story and play the DLCs. But where Origins told a good Assassin's Creed story and told good stories in general. I loved the side quests in this game. I loved the main story in this game. Everything about it was great besides the parkour. And at the time, it wasn't even that big of a problem due to the layout of the world and the way that it was designed. I mean, I've said that like 4 times now, but it's really true. Like, parkour is still serviceable for the environment that it was built in. And they were focusing much more heavily on combat and revamping that and revamping the way that the game worked in general, which is perfectly fine. It ended up being what it is, which is this. Who got mad at me? Let's see here. Okay, finish him off. Okay, come on, buddy. Who's this saying? Wait a second. Hide. Then we're gonna sprint across. And there. Kill it. And then the DLC for this game was amazing. Anywho, so we get to Valhalla. And Valhalla did a terrible job of what Black Flag did amazingly, which is combining the fantasy of being something into the fantasy of being an assassin. In Black Flag, it was being a pirate and being an assassin. And it worked for what it was, especially since like the story, you weren't an assassin for most of the game. But I was okay with that because of how good the story was. And the way that it made you feel for Edward and the whole change that you get to see in the character is phenomenal in that game. And it really, and it's still a story about the Brotherhood. It's still a story about assassins and Templars. Only the difference is that you weren't the assassin moving the assassin story along. You were just there for the ride until eventually you joined them. And it was an amazing story. It still sticks with me to this day, just like Origin Story does. Let's see here. We'll harass this guy with Senu. Then I'll kill this guy first. Kill him too. That was fun. Valhalla couldn't balance the two. The way that Valhalla felt was, you were just a Viking. There was no assassin fantasy as part of it. Eivor actively didn't want to be an assassin, didn't want to join them, didn't want to have anything to really like, do with their cause. They just were happy to have them along for the ride or whatever. Like, yeah, you could hunt people like an assassin, but it didn't encourage stealth. In fact, stealth was so broken it wasn't even possible half the time. Like, the way that detection works in that game is just such a mess, even to this day. I tried to go back and play it a few nights ago just to try and get back into it, since Mirage is built off of Valhalla's engine, but it's so bad. I can't stand it. Like there's these specific stealth missions, these stealth challenges, and there's nobody around to even remotely see you attacking somebody or assassinating somebody. And yet, as soon as I jump down for an assassination, I get detected by somebody who's 50, 60 feet away and facing the other direction. None of it makes sense. None of it makes it feel like, there's any consistency in the AI. There's no way of knowing whether or not an AI character is going to detect you. And because of that, stealth just feels awful in that game. It doesn't make sense. There's no way of guaranteeing that you are staying stealthy, and so there's no point in... It's just not viable. There's no point in trying to do stealth, because usually it's just so much more efficient and just feels better to be the Viking and go in horn blaring and weapons drawn and ready to massacre a bunch of people in an actual face-on fight. But that's not what you play Assassin's Creed for. Like, I guess some people might, but excuse me, I don't play the game because I want to be a Viking. I want to be a Viking assassin, and there's no way of being an assassin in an environment where it just doesn't condone actual stealth. And the worst part of it was advertised as this return of social stealth, return of these mechanics that used to be in these games that were just gone in Origins and beyond. What do you want? Alright, we're about to kill some people. Nope, you're dead. Bye-bye. So, I mean, the smoke bomb wasn't nearly as useful in this game, but it still existed. The stealth tools in Valhalla were absolute garbage. None of them, like, felt good to use, and because it was on an adrenaline system, it just didn't feel like there was a real cost to it, and even if it wasn't really... I don't know. Just everything about the stealth aspect of Valhalla was miserable. Like, I will give it credit for being a okay Viking game. Not that I enjoyed the combat all that much either, but like it worked for a Viking fantasy. It was just a terrible Assassin's Creed game. And that's kind of what Odyssey fell under criticism for too, is it's a good game, it's just not a great Assassin's Creed game. At least Origins is very much an Assassin's Creed game. I think anybody who says otherwise is completely delusional, because it's all about the Creed, even though there's not really a group of assassins yet. And especially in the Hidden Ones DLC, it's entirely about the Creed itself, and I think that's really what I want to get to, is the essence of Assassin's Creed is the Creed. It's not necessarily the assassins as a group. And it's not necessarily the Templars as a group. The Hidden Ones and the Order of Ancients work fine. But it's the belief system that they have that's the important part. And the Creed stays the same. And so what I expect out of Mirage, and what it's supposed to be, and what it's been advertised to be, is simply a return to those rooted decisions and choices that used to be a part of every Assassin's Creed game, where it used to revolve around the aspects of the Creed and what it means to really follow the Creed. The Creed being nothing is true, everything is permitted, and that the only real tenets are to stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent, to hide in plain sight, and to never compromise the Brotherhood. That you're not out here, and Origins really tells the story of why that's the case. It's the mistakes that Bayek and Aya make that inform the Creed and build it into this belief system that they teach and preach to the Hidden Ones of, there's a reason why we don't kill innocents. It's because the loss of innocent life isn't worth the reward and the victory when we actually achieve it. The whole point is to save people and to help people have the opportunity to make their own choices. And then you've got the second tenet of hiding in plain sight, is Bayek and Aya end up killing people out in the open way too many times, and because of that, that ends up with, by the end of it, they're betrayed by their own queen after doing her bidding for the entire game, and it's just a matter of them deciding, look, we're never going to put ourselves in that position again of being out in the open and being this figurehead or something that some other group can use and abuse. We are our own, and we'll be hiding in plain sight, trying to influence and everything for the better, but from our own ends and our own choices. And then finally, the last one is never compromising the Brotherhood, which is pretty straightforward. You don't compromise those others who also have chosen to live the life that you live and chosen to fight for the same cause. Don't do anything that would bring harm to the group as a whole. And I expect Mirage to be revolving around those tenets, and to be this game that blends a bit of, I feel like it's going to be Origins 2.0. From everything I've seen and heard and watched on Mirage, Origins 2.0 seems like the best way of describing the game. It's a condensed story, and it's going to be in a condensed location, that was built to facilitate parkour, as limited as it is, but it's built on Valhalla's engine, so it's not to be expected that it's going to be something different drastically from Valhalla. It's still running on this parkour system that started with Origins. But now you have assassin tools. Now you've got ways that really encourage you to be stealthy and be an assassin, and that's all I could really ask for in this day and age of the RPGs, especially when it started out as a Valhalla DLC. And we've just established that I absolutely despise Valhalla and feel like it's the worst Assassin's Creed game to exist. Like, to take... I expect it to be a good Assassin's Creed. I expect that it will probably be up there among my top 5. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, you know, 3rd favorite or 4th favorite. I would be surprised if it kicked out Black Flag, but I don't think it would kick out Black Flag as my 2nd favorite Assassin's Creed game. But I do expect it to be good for what it is. I don't expect it to be this second coming of the OG games or this grand return. I think it returns to the fundamental ideas that drove the first games of, we want you to feel like an assassin, that you're, you know, a part of this world, that you're there to assassinate these people who are trying to control society for their own ends and trying to do things and control people for their own ends, because they've got goals and ambitions and we've got goals and ambitions, and those goals and ambitions are so vastly different from one another that the only way of doing it is to remove them entirely. And so that is your job. You're just an assassin. You exist to fight these guys, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't need Basim to go through this whole arc of, oh, I'm joining the Hidden Ones to like avenge my family. I hope it's not a family revenge story or anything like that. Not that I think that it would be, but like, other than somebody who just wants to be a part of the Hidden Ones, and I'm happy if that's the story, and I'll be content if the story is decent. What I'm looking forward to the most is the gameplay. I want to return to Unity's style of stealth that's reliant on these tools that you've got, and to really think about tools as a means to achieve your goals of continuing to be stealthy. I want to be able to play as a speed stealth game rather than being this slow process. I mean, you'll see it here as I try to clear this area. Let's see if I can kind of show this off in a way. But like, I don't have, without tools, it's really hard to work this out in a viable way. Let's see. We'll wait for this guy to move. I wish Valhalla had this stuff too, like these guards who have actual schedules, like things that they're trying to do. I mean, we can go into the eagle mode and it'll tell you he's relieving himself. This guy's relieving himself. These guys are defending. This guy's eating. That guy's defending. Like, these guys all have schedules. They all go to sleep. They all have different time periods where they're active. Some are active than others. You can pick if you want to go in at night or in the middle of the day like this, or how you want to do it. But because of your lack of tools, there's not really a way of doing this quickly. Kill you. Climb up to you. Okay, that's another one gone. I mean, detection's still quick in this game, but at least like... There's no BS detection like there was in Valhalla. Most of the time you can avoid being seen if you know how to avoid being seen. Alright, we're gonna kill this guy as he's... Actually, here's what we'll do. We'll kill this guy as he's... Go there. That guy's dead. Their way in through the windows up there? Not really. Who are you calling over, buddy?
Something is not right. I don't feel it.
He's dead now. Great. We'll try.
That's disgusting.
He's dead. Cool. So we got those. Not what I intended, but it works. Let's see what this guy chooses to do here. Die. That's what you get for coming outside alone. See who's next on the list. Round 2, let's go. Oh, you're dead. This guy is none the wiser.
But I will deal with you. Focus.
Oh, we could shoot him with that, but no, we'll deal with him with this. Okay, he's dead. We assassinate the last guard. Like, it's doable. Stealth is very much doable in this game. It's not as encouraged as it could have been, but it's still fun to do, and it's rewarding to do, especially once you've got the hidden blade that can actually kill these guys. But having built up to that point, like, this is what I want for Mirage, is just better stealth. The environment looks like it's conducive to parkour, so at the very least, even though you don't have a lot of control, at least it's fun to do and like doable. And that's kind of just what I expect out of it. I don't expect it to be this innovative thing. It was originally a DLC, and I think anybody who expected more than that is kidding themselves, because it's not meant to be. It was it's meant to be this in-between game. It's not quite a return to roots. It's return to the roots in terms of ideas of you know, trying to be this old school Assassin's Creed game, but it's old school Assassin's Creed in the new engine, the new way of playing. And I think that Bordeaux has done the best that they can with Valhalla's engine. They were under a huge constraint by building it in that engine itself. But I'm excited for it. That was the whole point of this video, this streaming session, was just to talk about that and kind of rant about it, because I am excited. I'm happy to play this game. I hope you guys are excited to watch it tonight or watch it tomorrow, as we're going to be playing both tonight and tomorrow. But we'll see you there, and thank you all for watching and enduring this rant so far. But we'll be back in about 3.5 hours to start Mirage, and we'll see you then.